everyone. This is a thank you letter from the bomb that visited my home. Dear Ahmed, I knew that I was going to change your life. I knew that as soon as I entered your old home in Baghdad. Your dad Maitham was holding your sister Maryam in the kitchen. Your mom Hannah was near the dryer. I found a place between them. You were away at your grandparents' home, so we didn't get to meet. You didn't know this at the time, but I was a dud missile designed to destroy but not explode. I entered your home through the bathroom window, made my way through the walls of the kitchen cabinet, and sneaked through 3 natural gas canisters. You know those old school ones your mom used for cooking? I'm sorry for leaving gaping holes through each one. I was in a rush. Good thing your dad emptied them out 2 days before my visit. I've been reading your articles. I noticed that you mentioned me a lot, which first made me very uncomfortable. I'm not used to being recognized. I usually turn children like you and your sister into dust. When meeting new people, my palms tend to be bloody. Haven't you always wondered why your dad rarely spoke about me? He told you that tragedies ended with a period, but yours ended with a semicolon. You moved on to great things, but I was still there, watching. Most tragedies never fully disappear. They share your breath, your blood, and walk around the ridges of your ribcage when they can't fall asleep. But you were different. For some reason, I couldn't live within you. I couldn't share your breath or your blood. You wouldn't let me. Maybe it's because you weren't there. I know that every night before you fall asleep, you ask yourself what would have happened if you were there to meet me. I'm writing to thank you. Thank you for using me for good. Know that my body changes location without my permission. I don't enjoy meeting new people. I don't relish in the destruction. I'm designed to collect breaths and keep them to myself. No matter which side I'm on, this purpose never changes. Us bombs never get to choose who to visit. You came back to visit me a few years ago. You didn't see my body, of course, that was long gone, but you saw the window in the bathroom where I first introduced myself. It was now fixed, but I was still there, watching. You were alone. The rest of your family was outside, and you took out your phone to take a picture of me, but you were out of storage. You laughed at the irony. You put your phone down and stared at me, and I stared back. You smiled and walked away. And in that moment, I realized that your survival is my only salvation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Yasmin Khan. I'm a reporter in the newsroom here at WNYC, and I'm your host this evening. Thank you for being here with us. You look great. It's World Refugee Day, as you know, and the sun came out a little bit for our event. We're here for a few reasons. We're going to really delve into why there is an unprecedented number of migrants in the world right now. We are going to unpack some of the myths around refugees, and we're going to hear some of their stories through music and poetry. And I know that talking about refugees, it can be a heavy discussion sometimes for good reason, but there's room for lightheartedness tonight too, and we're really going to dwell on the contributions that refugees make to our lives and our culture, and just how they enrich our experiences in our cities. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I have a few questions for you. Hello.
Hello.
So why write a letter from the bomb? And you really inhabit the bomb.
Yeah, I think that the very first thing in writing this is that I didn't want it to feel like it's angry, or that it feels, I don't want people to read it and think, oh, I understand how the bomb feels now. You know, it's the exercise of writing it was kind of taking the trauma and kind of, you know, replacing it with responsibility and power over the narrative, right? And really just taking the power that it's had over my life and reclaiming it and trying to kind of ask a lot of the questions that I've always wondered about, but I also imagined that the bomb was asking as well.
But there is some optimistic sort of presence in your work. And do you see it that way? Is it optimism?
Yeah. I mean, optimism and I think just, again, responsibility. I think, coming to this country and having, learning to tell the story is itself a responsibility, but it's also a responsibility to be able to tell your story and allow other stories to exist at the same time. So I think I do this exercise where I ask young people, refugees and otherwise, to write a letter from the perspective of something that changed their lives, right? And this way, it doesn't have to be a tragedy. It could be about anything. It could be a place writing your letter. And it's a
any transformative
very helpful
moment.
exercise. Exactly.
So I am really excited about your project Unpacked. And I want to ask you a question about it, but first I want to share a clip with everybody.
On July 25th, 2006, in the middle of the night, my house in Baghdad was bombed. I was 7 years old. The missile tore the house in half and going through 3 natural gas canisters, which we had emptied out 2 days before. My name is Ahmed Badr. I'm a writer and former refugee from Iraq.
My name is Mohammed Hafez. I am a Syrian architect and artist in New Haven, Connecticut.
Recently, Mohammed and I have been collecting the stories of refugees resettled in America. I spoke to these families, heard their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs, and Mohammed remodeled parts of their stories in a suitcase. Each is a testament to their resilience and their powerful, powerful journeys.
Today, this work is more important than ever. Changing the narrative about refugees is a personal goal for both of us.
So you're really redefining what baggage means.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about how you decided to do that and how that came to be?
So first, we wanted to combine both of our skills, right? So Mohammed's an architect.
I'll move over so everybody can see you.
Yeah. So he, by day, is an architect, and that, you can see through each one of the sculptures. And we really, again, wanted to combine a very personal thing, luggage, that we all have. And all of the works were actually donated by folks that were immigrants in the past, and to kind of create a world inside of each of these after the worlds that they've already carried themselves was a really, again, it's a huge task, but we're entrusted with the stories and entrusted with the suitcases.
They are, I love dioramas, and I'm trying to figure out why, and I guess maybe because they are so painstakingly constructed.
Yeah.
How did you both manage to do that in terms of translating a story into this kind of piece of art?
I think a lot of conversations around lots, with each person. We have 9 suitcases, 9 stories of folks, and then a group part of it as well. And you sit down with the families, and for a lot of the families, it's their first time telling their stories. And one of the best feelings is when you're sitting down with the families, and Mohammed and I are sitting down and taking notes, mid-sentence, someone realizes they have a story to tell. And it's like a light bulb that goes off. And that's my favorite thing, because again, it's about feeling valid in your own experience and what you've gone through. And once the family saw the suitcases at the first exhibit, it was very emotional, because a lot of them were seeing representations of their homes that they've lost, years back.
So, what is the project you are most sort of involved in now? It's Narratio.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So tell me about Narratio and how it came to be and what you're up to.
Yeah, so Narratio, it's an online platform for creative expression for young people. We focus on displaced young people, but we publish the work of young people from over 18 countries. Recently, we've partnered with a refugee camp in Greece to publish 2 full-length magazines, a youth center and a camp north of Greece. And we've just continued on this idea of, how can you, work with your own story and publish it and making publishing accessible.
And how young, when we talk about young people, what's the age range?
Oh my goodness. So we have folks that are as young as, 10, 11 publishing their work, up to, 25, 26. So it's an interesting kind of combination. Yeah.
And you're doing some things this summer too with Narratio?
Yeah, so we're really excited. Right? Yeah. So we have, we're announcing this for the first time now. We're doing a storytelling fellowship in partnership with Syracuse University for 9 resettled refugees in Syracuse. So 3 weeks of programming, public speaking modules, media training, poetry. and it's culminating in a performance, private performance at the Met at the end of July. So I invite all of you to keep up with Narratio and join us. We'll be at the Assyrian Gallery. We'll take it over, and we'll have the fellows performing their poetry. So again, just really figuring out a way to, give people power over their own stories and help them tell it on their own terms.
My last question before we get to your next piece, I'm just curious, we talked about your optimism and just sort of, well, not quite optimism, but sort of empowerment through this work. And I'm just wondering, do you think that the United States, there's so much in the political climate right now that's sort of hanging over any discussion of refugees or immigration or anything, but do you think that the U.S. is still a place that has an allure of being somewhere where people can pursue their dreams?
Absolutely.
Do you have the freedom to do that, you think?
I think so. I mean, I think it's very easy to get caught up in the narrative of, just like the one thing that's really, that I've been really thinking about a lot is that whenever something happens, every side of the political spectrum has like the list of the good immigrants and then the bad immigrants, and people bring that list out whenever something happens that's relevant or not relevant sometimes too. But what about the people that are just living their lives? What about the person that's delivering pizzas so their family can eat and have food on the table, and then and their kids are going to school and they're doing well, right? So that's why with all these projects we're trying to really redefine even what we think of as a successful immigrant or a successful refugee, and that it could be anyone, and that there are aspects of the refugee experience and displacement that anyone could relate to, regardless if they've been displaced or not.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Ahmed Badr, we're going to hear one more piece from Ahmed right now, but we will get him back on the stage later. Thank you.
Thanks. So, I mentioned Greece earlier, and 2 years ago, an individual reached out named Angelou, who's amazing human being from this organization named Lighthouse Relief in Greece, at a camp that I ended up working at a year or two later. And she said, we would like for you to write a poem in memory of Elan and Kurdi, the young boy who washed up on the shore, that famous picture that really got people, that really kicked off, awareness about the refugee crisis for many folks. So they asked me to write this poem, and then they made a video of the different kids in the camps reading it. So I wanted to read that poem for you tonight. And it's something that is very, it's as young people, we sometimes create distances between our present and our past. And with this poem, we brought all of those together and threw in the future as well. So this is Shams, or sun. We still remember your eyes, how they made the sea tremble, how they reminded us that our mothers held us in the same way, that our fathers' shadows were just as tall, and our ancestors shared the same breath. Remember how the sun hugged our countries? A golden diary for every soul, young and old. Every page a testament to your resilience. We carry your spirit on our growing shoulders. We've learned to hold our memories within our bodies. That way we can migrate with our history. After all, our most prized possessions are the ones that can only be taken away by God. The sun now embraces us in a new land. We try to return the embrace, but we hear Aleppo's song in the distance. We hear Baghdad's poetry shaking the ocean floor. The cities sound impatient for our return. They speak of lost times, desperate journeys, and new worlds. They tell us that they still haven't forgotten. They tell us that the sun is in our hands and it's our job to return it. We will hold it with shaky palms and keep it in between our shoulders. And when the time comes, the world will be as welcoming as our mother's hands, as tall as the shadows of our fathers, and as eloquent as our ancestors' tongues. The sun will rise tomorrow, and so will your spirit. And in that moment, we will hug you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I'm going to welcome up Andrew Lim now from New American Economy. Hi, how are you? Andrew is the director of quantitative research at New American Economy, where he leads a research team that examines the economic impacts of immigration in the U.S. And we're going to talk about some myths around refugees that come up frequently. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to become a refugee. It's a very complicated process. So can you guide us through it, just so that we have sort of like the language down and just what happens, the process?
Sure. So the process of becoming a refugee that is resettled in the United States is extremely arduous. It is extremely lengthy. So the average length of time from start to finish of the process is anywhere from 18 months to 24 months. So 2 years before you are possibly resettled in the United States. But first, before you even are considered, you have to register with the UNHCR. And you have to fit into certain classes of established refugees. And from there, you have to be recommended by UNHCR to resettlement in the United States. And I believe under the Obama administration, they calculated that less than 1% of all refugees in the world are recommended or referred to the United States. And so if you think about, I believe yesterday, UNHCR released its estimate for how many people were fleeing conflict, and it was 71 million, the highest it's been since World War II. So if you think about how many of those people actually don't even get a shot at applying for refugee status in the United States. So you've applied, you've referred, and then you start the whole process of being vetted and documented by various agencies within the United States government. And that includes your fingerprints, your face, photographs, iris scans, fingerprints, palm prints, and those are all run through several layers of bureaucratic, anti-terrorism, anti-crime watch lists, most wanted lists, et cetera.
So significant vetting.
Significant vetting, exactly. These are some of the most documented people in the world, if you think about it that way.
Right. Thank you. So first, let's go through, you have 5 myths here for us. One thing that we hear often is that our cities don't need refugees. What do you have to say about that?
False. Refugees are people, and cities need people. And refugees are really unique in terms of immigrants because they don't get to decide where they go, in large part. They are assigned a place to go. And largely
And that's why we have a graphic up here, right?
And largely they go to places where they are needed. And a lot of cities are struggling with depopulation, losing their residents. This has various effects, losing customers for local businesses, local tax bases that help fund education, infrastructure, police departments. So if you look at, especially in this table here, you can see a lot of these cities, and these are cities that receive the most refugees relative to their population, a lot of them would have shrunk had it not been for refugees. And that has, as I said, sort of knock-on effects economically.
So that leads us to our next myth, which is that refugees are a drain on our society.
Also false. Refugees, as soon as they arrive, are encouraged to become as self-sufficient as possible. They are required through their contract of resettlement to take the first job offer they have. So it may not be the most lucrative job. It may not be the job they have experience in, but they have to take that job because the idea is the United States wants you to work and contribute and to repay the costs it took people to get you here. And so they start off low. So we did a report on refugees, and refugees in the first 5 years, their average income was about $22,000, quite low. But as they gain more time and experience in the United States, perhaps their English language improves, they develop social networks, they're better able to participate in the job market and to grow those networks. And eventually, after they've been here for about 2 decades, they actually have a higher median income than the US average. So it's sort of a very clear upward trajectory.
Okay. So the next myth is that refugees are dangerous.
Very false. As I said, they are the most documented. Immigrants,
or just a fear of being dangerous.
Exactly. And so we did a study looking at crime rates and refugees. And I will say that for immigration in general, the consensus is that there's no relationship between immigration and crime. And for refugees specifically, we looked again at communities that had disproportionately taken in refugees. And in 9 of those 10 communities that we found, or that we studied, they saw significant declines in their violent and property crimes. And so I believe the best example we had was Southfield, Michigan, a town of about 72,000, accepted between 2005 and 2017 about 4,500 refugees. It saw its violent crime rate decrease by 77%. So that's a huge drop.
Right. Wow. That is significant. I mean, are we attributing that to the new refugee population?
I mean, if you're going to believe a lot of what
Right.
people say, you wouldn't expect a drop that significant. And
Right.
so, the data out there on crime and refugees is still rather thin. There's a lot that needs to be done still in that area. But you would not expect a drop, or even among those top 10 cities, 9 of them having such significant declines.
So, myth 4, all refugees are from the Middle East. We have another graphic to show you too. I'll just note that it's actually, I think, a little easier. Oh, this looks pretty good. You can also see it pretty clearly on the screens if that's easier than the projector. So explain what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea of the Muslim ban and how it affects refugees. But if we look at refugee resettlement in the United States from 2002 to 2018, which is the most recent data we have for full years, you'll see that the refugee population is really diverse. And actually the most common country of origin for refugees is Burma or Myanmar. And among the top 10 countries you see here, Iraq, Somalia, Iran are really the only, and Sudan are maybe the only ones considered majority Muslim.
And so Syria is not on this chart. I guess I would have thought that Syrians would have been among the highest groups entering the U.S.
So if you think about the Syrian conflict, it actually starts rather late in this sort of period.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's only just been in the past few years, like 2015, 2016,
Exactly.
people started coming.
And
that makes
then
sense.
the ban.
Okay, myth 5. The travel ban only affects a small number of people.
Yes. So even though they may not register here, as we were saying, the Syrian conflict, a re-escalation of conflict in Somalia, Yemen, et cetera, these are all countries that have been placed on that travel ban list. And so if you look at the last full year that we accepted refugees from those countries, 30,000 refugees in 1 year. Flash forward to 2018, where we only accepted 198. So that's a huge decline, obviously almost 100%. And that affects not only the people who are hoping for safety in the United States, but also many refugees have families here, cousins, friends who have made it and now are unable to be reunited with them.
And maybe it means that the refugees, that it's just not in alignment with the crises that are going on in the world if we're accepting far fewer.
Exactly. And as the UNHCR number tells you, the problem isn't going away. 71 million people in the world that are fleeing conflict. And at the same time, the United States, which has historically been the number one country in terms of third country resettlement in the world, is now certainly shutting its doors to a majority of refugees.
And we spoke about at the beginning how the intense vetting process. So the travel ban was essentially an additional layer. So these people coming from these countries get even more vetting.
Exactly. And a good example of that is in 2016, for Syrian refugees in particular, they had a separate step of vetting that no other foreign national refugees had to do. So specifically for Syrian refugees, there was a special step the US government had created for them to protect against fraud. So the government knew and addressed these fears about fraud, about mistaken identities, and still.
Thank you so much. Andrew Lim of New American Economy. Appreciate your time. Thank you. We are going to have a discussion around these issues and hear some more personal stories. I'd like to welcome our panel to the stage. I'm going to sit down now. Hello. Okay. I want to introduce everybody. Immediately to my left is Edafe Okporo. He's the executive director of RDJ Shelter in Harlem. He migrated from Nigeria in 2016 after being persecuted for being gay. Ninette Kelley is director of UNHCR's office in New York. She also served for 5 years in the field in Lebanon, leading one of the agency's most complex refugee operations. Falia Hassan was born in Iraq amid the ongoing Iraqi-Kurdish conflict. She fled to Turkey in 2011, came to America in 2012, and to help deal with the horrors she witnessed, Hassan turned to her writing, creating poems about love, family, womanhood, hope, and war. Welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Faliha, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
So, like Ahmed, you fled Iraq, but it wasn't a bomb that forced you to leave. You were actually, your name was put on a terrorist death list.
Yeah.
Can you share with us what happened?
Yeah. As you know, during Saddam regime, we don't have internet or mobile or something like that. We just have the local TV, local newspaper, and regular phone. We can call each other. But after his regime is gone, after 2003, I received, the people start communicate with each other through internet. And I received phone call from my friend. She said, Falia, I don't know how can I tell you that, but I saw your name in a dead list.
That they published on the internet?
Yes. And then, first of all, I said, no way. I didn't do nothing, make them scary for me or something. Then I started to go to the cafe, internet cafe, just to make sure she told me the truth. Then I went there, I searched about my name, I find out my name update 3 times in different local newspaper. And also they update that in different website. But not just me. There's so many, this list almost 100 people. They are educated women, poet, writer,
Artists?
Artist, of course.
So how did you get on this list for being a writer?
Yes, maybe.
For things you had written?
Yeah, I do, I still writing, but I did write something about women's rights and, articles about the government, the new government we have right now. Mm-hmm. This is the reason they have my name there. And that's make me scary. And, of course, I decided to take my kids. I don't worry about myself, but I have 2 kids. I have 4 kids, but 2 young kids, they just need someone to take care of them. That's why
So you knew the threat was real when your name was on the list?
Yeah. And then I escaped from my city, Najaf, to Baghdad, from Baghdad to Suleymaniye, to Erbil, from Erbil to Turkey. And then I lived in Turkey for 1.5 years in different cities. I went in Eskişehir, then Afyonkar Sahari, then I applied for refugee status, and then one time in 2012 I received a phone call from Catholic Charity. They said, "Do you have any relative or friend in America?" I said, "No." They said, "Because of that, we will take care of you, and you will be with us in New Jersey." Then I came 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it take 18 to 24 months?
Yes, it's a long process.
Edafe, what was your experience as a gay man in Nigeria? And actually, I wonder if you could contrast that with your experience in New York City.
So I didn't know anything apart from what I knew in Nigeria. So I would say that my experience as a gay man in Nigeria was fine for the first part of my life, because I also believed that being gay was evil. I grew up in a very conservative environment, and all I was taught, or all I knew, was that gay people were evil. So I believed that same narrative, that I myself was also evil. So in 2014, the government of Nigeria passed a law that criminalizes same-sex by 14 years imprisonment, and organizations that provide services for gay men, 10 years imprisonment. Same-sex cohabitation, 10 years imprisonment. organizations that provide safe space or abide or cohabit or any amorphous show of public affection, 10 years imprisonment. So it became very difficult for you to be gay or things like that. But in that same 2014, the clinic I was working for, we started receiving a lot of attack from police and non-state actors. In 2016, after the World AIDS Conference, when I returned from South Africa, they came into my apartment. They broke into my apartment and said that they found out that I was gay. And they dragged me out, beat me on the streets, stripped me naked, singing and clapping behind me that I'm gay, that they have found out and they are going to kill me. And I was living in a Muslim-dominated community in Abuja. In 7 Muslim states in Nigeria, gay men are persecuted by being stoned to death. Luckily, I survived that attack and I traveled to United Arab Emirates. But I couldn't seek asylum in Dubai. So I returned back to Nigeria and I was in hiding. While I was in hiding in 2016, October, AVAC published my name as a grassroots winning LGBTQ rights activist, and my names and photograph were published saying that I should be brought down dead or alive. This was published on the 25th of October. On the 27th, I bought a flight ticket and I traveled to Cairo. From Cairo, I found myself in JFK seeking asylum. But it's a long process to get to this point. But right now in America, gay people are accepted. If you go everywhere, corporations are slapping the rainbow flags everywhere. But it's funny, but it's truth, is that gay rights in America is like what it is right now in Nigeria 50 years ago. It's peaceful for you to be gay, but there are people who are also fighting gay people, with the current administration and so many other things. I want to be optimistic. I try to be optimistic, but it's hard to be optimistic under these current conditions. I would say that freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and freedom of want was what Roosevelt said in his speech in 1941, and that is the founding value of the UN. We are free to express ourselves, but if we don't continue to fight and hold down in America, our rights can also be overturned. So I'm happy to be living in America as a free gay man, but I'm also cautious of the rights I have right now.
Even despite your horrendous experiences in Nigeria, was it painful to leave your country?
So if I have anxiety, I laugh. But it's funny. Why would you ask me if it's painful? If you are living in the US and tomorrow you find yourself in China and everything you lose everything. I have a master's in my home country. My family, when it's Christmas or Thanksgiving in New York City, I might be alone. Everybody are with their family. I grew up, everything I knew, I just leave them one day and it's just like a new life, a new place and things like that. To say the least, America is a very nice place. New York City is big, it's beautiful. And I would say that I'm enjoying my life here, but there is no place like home. You can never replace your home. No matter how Burger King burgers are very nice or all these things, but I like cassava and I like other things. I can't have it right now because I have to flee. So I would say that right now I'm trying to find a new life in America, but I miss my family.
Of course. Ninette, you said that you've heard from people all over the world about their extreme and severe experiences and that leaving their country is sort of a last desperate act. But then people need a place to go. And so you've been doing this work for a long time, and I'm wondering if you can just give us a window into the hurdles that refugees face resettling in another country. You can use the U.S. as an example, but just even all over the world.
Well, I think it would be very useful to start with the fact that most refugees who flee their country, what they do is they flee to the next country. Mm-hmm. And those countries tend to be the poorest countries in the world. And 84% of all refugees, of the 26 million refugees who've left their homes and left their countries, are located in some of the most, in the developing world and some of the most least developed countries. And I can give you so many examples. Turkey, for example, hosts over 3.7 million refugees. So they go to Turkey or
Syrians go to
or
Turkey.
Lebanon or Jordan. Lebanon, 1 in 6 persons in Lebanon is a refugee. Lebanon is the country that fits in the size of Connecticut, for example. So when we're talking about resettlement, we're talking about a very small proportion of refugees that have permission from wealthier countries to travel to those those countries and establish a life. And we in UNHCR are looking to countries all over the world and saying, please take in more refugees, because this is a disproportionate burden on the countries that can least afford to host refugees. But sadly, the number of resettlement places that we receive from resettlement countries is always a fraction of what we think is needed. And we already prioritize people who are in need of resettlement as those people who have an urgent and pressing need to leave the country in which they're in because they have a security concern. Edafe could have been one of those. For example, if he went to the UAE, where same-sex relations is also criminalized. So he would be a person that would be in need of an emergency, of a resettlement need, or somebody with a very gripping health need, or people who, for whom the authorities in their home state might be chasing. And so we try to resettle on a priority basis those people who have an absolute urgent need to flee. And we estimate that 1.4 million refugees in the world today need that kind of emergency release. And yet last year, we were only able to find resettlement places for 92,000. Great for the 92,000 people that did find a home. Most of them found a home in the States and in Canada, but at the same time, not enough to meet what we see as a pressing and urgent need. And also it sends a very bad signal to Turkey, to Lebanon, to Jordan, to Uganda, to Ethiopia, to Bangladesh, that are hosting millions of refugees, for the wealthier countries to say, we really can't afford to take in many here.
And the U.S. has dramatically cut the number of refugees that it's taking in each year.
The U.S. has, and I do feel compelled to tell you all to also put this in a global perspective. The U.S., and if you are U.S. taxpayers, I want to thank you, because by far you're the biggest donor to our budget of any other country in the world. And without the support of the American people and the U.S. government, we couldn't do the work that we do. And in fact, the U.S. also is one of the largest funders of humanitarian programs generally. So let's keep that in perspective. The U.S. has been a world leader in terms of resettlement places, but our message to other countries has been, please, you need to also step up. This is not just a one country or two country accountability or responsibility. We look to other countries to do more as well.
And I'll just sort of give a shout out to all of the groups that have, New York and New Jersey has been very welcoming of refugees. And so many people have just started groups in their living room and just organized and coordinated to really welcome refugees into their communities. So that's been really interesting and wonderful to see pop up over the last few years. I'm just wondering also, was there a sort of heyday of warmth when countries welcomed refugees? I mean, it seems like with the rhetoric now that refugees are sort of being given the cold shoulder, not just here, but globally and in Europe as well. And I'm wondering if there was a time when there was a more welcoming spirit or not.
Well, I'd answer that in two ways. If you look at resettlement numbers, yes, there was a heyday in resettlement. It was over the boat people crisis, the Indo-Chinese movements, where by countries, and mostly it was, again, Canada, the U.S., Australia, came in with large resettlement numbers. And these things are cyclical, so they come and they go. And even in my country, we've had periods where we've had huge, very robust annual numbers of resettlement, followed by periods of contraction, followed by expansion again. And I would assume that you'll see that in the States as well. But the picture in terms of welcoming is a mixed one. We hear, if you read the papers, you really would think that the countries that are most beleaguered by the movement of people and by refugee influxes are the Western democratic countries. And yet, as I've said to you before, they're not. 84% are the Turkeys, Lebanons, Jordans, Pakistan, Uganda, Iran. Iran and Pakistan have had, together they have close to 3 million Afghan refugees for over 40 years. So when you look from that angle, the generosity that these countries show is astounding, especially given the challenges they face. And from that lens, there still is a huge welcoming spirit. And even in countries with now restrictive immigration and restrictive refugee policies, there are grassroots movements, there are communities, private sector partners, faith-based groups, even conservative faith-based groups that are coming around and reaching out to persons because they recognize the need and they say, something that is common to our humanity, we want to be part of that reaching out and helping out. So it's definitely a mixed picture.
Well, that is a good segue to talking about Edafe's work. Can you tell us briefly what RDJ Shelter does? And especially in this context where maybe people are cutting, countries like the U.S. are cutting refugee programs, and maybe the number of asylum seekers is going up as a result?
Yeah, I just want to start by saying that thank you for what you have said earlier, but I know that as UNHCR, you cannot talk to the government in the way I can, so I'm going to say it the way it is. That we appreciate the fact that the US government is supporting you guys with funding, but that is a structure that has been created before this current administration, and that is a structure that has been existing for a very long time. And the funding you are getting is not directly from the US government, it's from people who individually donate funds to USA for UNHCR that lead to the contribution. The US government currently have cut down the refugees that they take from 120,000 to 35,000, and we talk about numbers and we lose value of the humanity of the people involved directly. I work as the director of RDJ Refugee Shelter. We welcome thousands of people on the phone, and we can only take 35 each year. If you type Refugee Shelter on your phone, my organization will pop up anywhere you are in the US. People call us every day and say, hey, I came to United States, I don't have a place to live in. So RDJ Refugee Shelter is a place that helps asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants who do not have a place to live or are experiencing housing insecurities to have a preliminary place or a temporary place to live in. We fill in the gap that the government is supposed to fill in. When a refugee is resettled in a new country, in United States, I bet you, IRC gives you $300 for 3 months and say go. How can you resettle with $300 for 3 months? It's not possible. Even in New York City, there is no place that there is a room for a week for $300. There is no accommodation for the resettling migrants. There is no feeding. Did you get food stamp or some other benefit because you have masters in your country? They cut you from some benefits. Even I myself, because I have a college degree, this thing is often too often that Americans think that people come to this country to take from the resources from this country. And I will tell you the truth. Every migrant that is coming to this country that are forced to flee want to contribute to the society. And I see it with my organization every single day. If a lizard fall from the sky and get to the floor, if nobody praises him, it nods his own head to say thank you to himself. And I want to say thank you to all of you that is making it possible to support migrants in New York City, but it shouldn't stop here. It should spread to other parts of the country. If it's possible in New York City to have a shelter that is supported by ordinary day citizens, I think that this is a model that should spread to other parts of America.
And in terms of the gap that you're filling, I'm just wondering though, how, for you personally, how did it come to be that you wanted to create an organization like this?
So when I was released from the detention center, I came through New York. I was taken to Elizabeth, New Jersey. Someone who came through
Why did
New
that make you
York
laugh?
it's funny. I was released in New Jersey by 10 p.m. in the night in Elizabeth, in between FedEx and other warehouses trucks. No train card, no direction. I came from Africa. I was wearing the warm clothes, and it's spring. Like, no place to live in. I went to the YMCA. I don't have money. I was supposed to sleep in a McDonald's that night. So transgender people are forced to sleep with people so that they can have a place to stay. My friend told me, do you have HIV? I said, no. He said, you are going to suffer because there's no housing for people who do not have HIV and AIDS. If you don't have mental health, there's no housing, no disability, no housing. If you are a sanctuary city and you don't have a place for people you are providing sanctuary to live in, then you are not doing your job as a city. And a society that is depending on charity for its people to survive has failed the core of serving its people. And I myself have dedicated my life to service. And I say to myself that if American government, not Americans, I'm sorry, I apologize. If American government is not going to provide a place for people, we're going to rally around to talk to churches to be able to provide a safe space. And that is why I came into filling that position.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow. We just have a few minutes, but I want to get to Falia's work also. So you've written that in Iraq it's hard to be a writer as a woman there. Yeah. You are known as, or Oprah has called you the Maya Angelou of Iraq. Is that right? I don't know. I like saying Oprah, Maya Angelou, and you in the same sentence.
It's not Oprah make this title. Yeah, it's not easy to be a writer, in Iraq, a woman writer in Iraq. I remember in 1991 when I published the first book. It's called Because I Am a Girl. It was a poetry book, and I became the first woman wrote poetry in my city, in Najaf. When I have book signing this time, there's more than 100 men came to this event, not to support me, but they want to know what's going on, why she's put herself with us. That's our, place. Like in their imagination, I'm taking them place. And I remember one guy, he took my book and he said, this is shame on Najaf, because Najaf, my city. This is shame on Najaf because this book, first of all, it has, he didn't read my book, but first of all, it's wrote by a woman, and it has a cover with a woman face without hijab on, like there's a hair show, something like that. And from this moment, I started to have my fighting. I fight so many, issues with the writing. Then after that, they start to send me invitation to so many different places to go to read poetry and attend a festival, and I became popular. That's why then I wrote stories and novel and plays, and I became the first woman in Iraq wrote poetry for children, and I published my book, and then I published 24 books. And after that, they gave me a title, Maya Angelou of Iraq.
And then did the men come and actually see you, come to you to hear your poetry?
No.
Okay.
They stole,
So I'd like to end the panel. We're unfortunately out of time. I think we could sit here for an hour and talk. But I want to hear one of your poems. And it's from a new book that you have,
yes,
right?
When I came here to America, of course, I'm a teacher. I went to teacher. I taught for 24 years. I have a PhD degree, but right now I have a master's degree in Arabic language. But when I came here, because I was facing just on my PhD degree, I didn't finish it because, my name going into that list. I was focusing just on Arabic language. When I came here, I came with zero English. Then I went to the school, Gloucester County College, and then I asked them to for help, to help me with my language. They said, do you have a degree? I said, yeah, I have master's degree in Arabic language. They said, there is no financial aid for you. If you like to, to learn English, you will pay from your pocket. But I have 2 teenage, I have no work this time. That's why I decided to work with my language by myself.
So you did that. How many years were you studying English?
Here?
Yeah.
7 years.
So 7 years, and now this was your first set of poems written in English?
No, I wrote a book, collection of poems. It's called Breakfast for Butterflies. Mm-hmm. And this book nominated in English language. And this book nominated to Pulitzer Prize 2018.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to hear a poem from that book.
Yes.
So can you read that to us
yes.
now? My Father's Feet.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm still young, but I use my glasses. My father's feet. When I was a kid, I saw them running and running and running after the bus that took him to his job every morning and returned him to us late every day, carrying so much love in his heart and bags of food to our soul and our mouths, starving forever. Running after our school books, which we were covering with our prayers to protect us from the sticks of our principal and teachers. Running after my mother, whose days all finished in different hospitals. And when I grow up a little bit, I saw them still running and running and running, but in military boots, for days never ending, covered with the dust from Khormashahr and Dizavol. And when he stretched out his feet on the floor, we all ran to them with joy, and like a big pillow filled with dreams, we slept on them.
Thank you to our panelists, Edafe Okporo, Ninette Kelley, and Falia Hassan.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome up Mirza Ramič. Hi, Mirza. Mirza is a Bosnian-born American-based artist and co-founder of Arms and Sleepers. He fled the Bosnian War and grew up across continents, countries, and states, living in Tunisia, Egypt, Italy, Croatia, Czech Republic, Arizona, and Massachusetts. Mirza's mother, a piano teacher, introduced him to the piano at age 6. Subsequently, the piano became the one constant in their lives as they kept moving further away from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Mirza is going to play some music for us, but he has a few elements prepared, so I'm just going to hand it over to him.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. Just fire up all these, way too many gadgets that I have here. Thank you very much for being here. It was really hard listening to some of those stories because there was a bunch of things that I can completely relate to, even though I come from a different part of the world. That part of the world on the left. I don't know what happened on the right. Life happened, I guess. But my name is Mirza Ramič. That's the Bosnian pronunciation. Mirza is how I go in the US. So I'm going to just do a little bit of talking and a little bit of playing music. The volume will go up a little bit from what it's been, because it is electronic music, just so you know. And there will be a quick Q&A at the end if you have any questions or comments about anything I say. So I was born in Bosnia and Herzegovina, formerly Yugoslavia, which fell apart in the early 90s. We had this big war. And I came to the United States in 1996 with my mom. My dad was killed in the war in 93. And we actually came through not too far from here at JFK, like a lot of refugees, 2 suitcases in hand, and we kept going to Arizona, which was a strange part of our life because we went straight from Czech Republic, Prague to Tucson, Arizona, and that was a huge shock. And like Andrew, you were talking about refugees having to take any work that they can find. My mom's a piano teacher, but she took a $5.25 an hour salad bar job. And I worked there for a year, and she has 20 years at that time experience of teaching kids piano. So, yeah, my mom is a piano teacher, and I've been doing music my whole life. Mostly, I do music as Arms and Sleepers, which is some of the songs that I'll play tonight. I recently also started a solo piano project, and I'm releasing that album tomorrow. And that one is, I'm not trying to do like promo, but it is coming out tomorrow. But that album is very much about my personal journey from one part of the world to a very different part of the world, which is this world here. And it was a very surreal journey, and one that'll be a constant source of inspiration and anxiety for me. And that's just the way it's going to be forever, I think. So my solo piano project is called Saigon Would Be Soul. And I came across that phrase in a collection of short stories by the Vietnamese-American author Viet Thanh Nguyen. I guess maybe some people know the book The Sympathizer. But he has this other book called The Refugees. And in it, a Vietnamese woman says how Saigon today would be as modern and progressive as Seoul in South Korea. If there wasn't a Vietnam War. And we have similar kind of sentiments amongst Bosnian people whenever we talk about, which is not that often, but whenever we do talk about what happened and the wars, there's always this sort of feeling of what if and what could have been. And I think that cuts deep through every refugee's heart, no matter where they come from. So that phrase really stuck with me when I read it, and I decided to name the project that. And then connected to that piano project is also a short documentary film about a lot of the things that we're talking about, but it's mostly me going back to Bosnia and playing the piano in my old destroyed house and trying to really kind of confront that uneasiness and sadness that's there and find some healing through music. So I wanted to just play you an excerpt, a minute and a half from that film. It's called To Tell a Ghost, and it'll be released later this year. So I'll do that first. Oh yeah, the most unwanted passport on the left back in the day, and the most wanted passport on the right. I have both.
About 6 years ago, I was a student attending a graduate school class in Boston, Massachusetts. This particular lesson was about the peace negotiation process in former Yugoslavia in the 90s. I remember sitting in class, drinking my coffee, like everyone else, and suddenly freezing on the inside. I was feeling this burning emptiness, like the craziness and horror of war were now being stripped down to a clinical history lesson filled with statistics. My family and I directly experienced this war, and now we were in a school textbook a few thousand miles away. It was all very surreal, and I just felt numb.
Thanks. So I'm going to play a few Arms and Sleepers songs for you. So the first one is a short one, and it's called Kill First, Paint Later. And it's about this reality that most people who are involved in a war end up reintegrating into society as normal civilians after the war. And the same people who were doing the killing or who contributed somehow to the killings eventually end up back at their normal jobs, maybe even as artists. And then It Was Us will follow that. And it's tied to the sentiment behind Saigon Would Be Seoul, this lingering pain of what once was, present in most of the lives of many refugees. I've thought a lot about what was in my life as a child growing up in Bosnia, how quickly everything fell apart. My family was, my house was, and my city was, and it's not anymore. So that's kind of the sentiment behind those songs. So I'll go ahead and play those songs, and then I'll get back on the microphone. Thank you.
Relatively easy life. It was an adventure more than a penalty, even amongst the bombs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope it wasn't too loud. Thank you. I usually play in places where like I move a lot, and I know it's kind of weird here, but I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do what I usually do. But I'm going to play one more song, and this one's called Frantic, 1992. Does anyone know the movie Frantic from the 80s? Nobody? Cool. So there's this movie called Frantic from late 1980s with Harrison Ford. It takes place in Paris. And this was the last movie I ever saw in our house in Bosnia before we left. It's very ironic that it's called Frantic because that's exactly how I would describe that moment in my life. But when the bombing began in 1992, my parents told me that I could watch TV if I sat in a corner of a room, because apparently it was safer to sit in a corner during bombings. So I would watch this movie, Frantic, with Harrison Ford over and over from the corner of a room, across the room. And it's the last thing I saw there. And when I saw the movie, much later in my life, it brought back a lot of really weird and painful memories. So whenever I play the song live, I have some footage from that movie in the visuals, and it's also some footage of me with my dad when I was little, so it's all kind of mixed in together. So I'll do that song, and I'll do that. Thank you.
We're going to see it now.
you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to say one quick thing. I know we're running late. Is there time for me to just say one quick thing? Yeah, cool. So that's in Bosnian, hvala. You probably guessed it by now. But one last thing I'll mention is that I've shared my personal story and others have shared their personal stories tonight. But there's millions of other stories, of course, and there's a lot of refugee stories being created right now, unfortunately. I've struggled with the fact that I'm now a privileged American citizen. I can, travel freely, and I can play music wherever I want, pretty much, including places where refugees are still fighting for survival. It's really surreal for me to think that when I was a refugee fighting for survival, there were Western artists playing near me, and that's a really weird thing to think about. So music and art has really helped me get through the toughest moments of being a refugee, so I can only hope that the music that I create can help others and maybe help them tell their own story. So thank you very much for listening and for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mirza. We are pretty much out of time, but I don't know if anyone has a snappy question that they want to ask Mirza.
Anything that they want to...
I can already say that I think I feel more moved by Frantic 1992 than I ever will by Frantic 1987 or whatever when I see it.
It's a pretty good movie. Harrison Ford has to find his wife in Paris.
A snappy question. Okay. You in the white shirt, blazer.
The microphone's not working, but I'm going to try to be loud.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm just going to say it's actually working right now.
Working
it's
now.
Great.
It's perfect.
So
We have microphones that work
I'm going to just say something in Bosnian. Hvala puno buraz. I'll just say one thing, that sometimes we feel alone, and it's great to see there's other people like us that have gone through similar experiences. I also arrived in '96. I also arrived through JFK. I did not go to Arizona. I went to Florida. About the same experiences, different climate. It was very humid, not dry.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
sharing
you.
that. Thank you.
I want to invite Ahmed Badr back on the stage. I understand that you two are collaborating for the first time.
Can you believe it?
This is a world premiere.
Yeah.
Right here.
Huge.
So come back up.
It's huge stuff.
Ahmed.
Ahmed asked if we could work on something together, and he had this specific Arms and Sleepers song in mind that worked really well with this really, really beautiful and moving poem, which I've already read and I've told you, but it's incredibly beautiful. So thank you for choosing one of the Arms and Sleepers songs to go along with it. And this song is called Crash, and it was named after that movie from the early 2000s called Crash. Okay, there's a movie theme here, yes. But that movie, for those of you that don't know, is about all kinds of racial and social issues in the U.S. And the song was kind of written with the idea that there is still some kind of humanity. There people do help each other out, even in these really tough times sometimes. But that's what it was trying to capture, that feeling. So I'll cue up the song and listen to your beautiful poem.
Yeah, if I can just say something quickly before we start. First, Mirza, thank you for trusting me with this song.
Yeah, of course.
And it's really, really a pleasure to see you do your work in action. Really proud to be part of it. And also, just want to say to Faliha Hassan, you're a giant in literature, and I'm very proud to be with all of you tonight. But especially to you, you're not just the Maya Angelou of Iraq, you're the Faliha Hassan of Iraq. So thank you. This is Nakhal, inspired by the date trees of Iraq. Yesterday, I saw a picture of a field of date trees, cut off at the head where the fruit is supposed to grow. I tasted my first date in Baghdad when I was 3 years old. My father picked the fruit straight from the tree and handed it to me. I immediately tasted the sweetness in my fingers. Back then, I had date-sized hands. All the dates I tasted were grown at my grandparents' home. We had 4 date trees stretching into the sky. One of our trees was over 20 feet tall, and when harvest season came along, we had to hire someone to climb it. The trees had lessons within their roots. Imagine a botanist at an American college looking at a date tree from Baghdad. They might study and marvel at the resilient plant, but they won't see the centuries of wisdom. They'll miss the lessons. Yesterday, I asked my mom about dead things. I asked her why the date trees had been cut off at their heads and why they were drooping. She said that they don't stand because their roots are tired. They don't speak because their lips are in a foreign museum. They're stuck behind a language barrier. Mama, are date trees a metaphor for our country? Ask your grandmother, she said. She's seen enough date trees to be more knowledgeable than all of Iraq. My grandmother grew up in the 1940s, back when Iraq was a kingdom that God still cared about. She said that back then the fruit tasted sweeter and the date trees grew with pride. Back then we walked with stories on our shoulders and emptied them out at the dinner table. Back then you didn't just wear your clothes, you wore your ancestors. She told me that on Thursdays she wore Babylon and on Mondays she wore Sumeria. She told me that on Fridays she loved wearing her two favorite earrings, the Tigris and the Euphrates, the rivers that run through our country. Today, I saw a picture of a country, cut off from any color, going to sleep without plans for awakening. I saw a picture of a playground where children are supposed to play with their date-sized hands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, Mirza, to all of our participants tonight. Thank you all for coming and being with us. Thank you to those watching on the live stream at home. Thank you to the Green Space team, especially Cameron Tompkins and Sachi Ezra. I really appreciate your help. Have a great night. Thanks so much.